for good. That's the point. It's not using it all for holiness or, so I can be righteous or go to heaven. It's not that. It's use all that I am for the good for myself, good for other people, good for the good. Just that's what I want it to. I want my life to be for good. I want my art to be for the good.
Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day, listeners. This is CJ Miller, your host for the Spiritual Artist Podcast. I am very excited with today's guest. This is someone that I met many years ago. We've crossed paths here and there, and I will tell you what I'm so excited about. This is a person who a lot of people listen to his music in a lot of different spiritual centers and churches around the country. You'll sit there and you'll be in service, and suddenly you'll see his name pop up on the screen. So he is a very prolific writer and musician. But let me introduce Reverend Michael Gott. He has been well known in the world of New Thought spirituality for over 20 years. First as a musician and recording artist, and in the last decade as a teacher, minister, and spiritual leader. He has received numerous honors and awards, including a doctorate from the Centers for Spiritual Living for his contributions to the field of contemporary spiritual music. He is currently serving as senior minister at Unity of Houston. It is one of the largest Unity locations in the country. He has recorded and released 10 albums, and his most recent album, Be Revealed, was released in 2022. And as you know, I love talking about art, creativity, music, and spirit. So good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so thrilled to have you on here. We chatted a bit beforehand, and I have run into Michael a few times, and most recently at the Church of One Love, he came in and presented a service, and that's when I hit him up for this. So, Michael, I'm so excited because I started listening. There's so many classical songs that you have that are just so emotional and beautiful, but I decided 2 days ago to just do a deep dive into your Be Revealed album, which was a 2022 album, and I love it.
Thank you.
I just your ability to put lyrics together, but the emotional content when you sing is just incredible.
Well, thank you.
It's really, truly your gift. And so I wanted to remind you, my brand is helping people connect with spirit when they create art. And
Good.
music is art.
Right.
And so that's where I'm like, oh, I've got to unpack some of this with you this morning.
Good. Yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you. I noticed there's kind of a theme, a very strong theme in this most recent album. And a lot of it is inviting God within, inviting spirit within, reveal yourself through me, let your light come through me. What drove you for that?
Yeah, I think it's, well, my spiritual background is pretty varied. I grew up a fundamentalist, Christian, Pentecostal, and Methodist, both in there. But country Methodist in Oklahoma is more like Southern Baptist, very legalistic and a lot of judgment. And then, so I had these kind of two big things in my life. I had this big secret that I was gay, and I was full on sold out for Jesus, wunderkind of the evangelical world. I was doing music and stuff. I became the church pianist at 12, and those things, I finally, my need for authenticity kind of won out. And when I was a sophomore at Oral Roberts University, I began the coming out process, telling my family and friends what was going on. And somehow, and I'm actually writing a memoir right now, and the working title is There Is Only Love. The subtitle is How a Good Gay Boy Survived Christian Fundamentalism But Held On to God.
Oh, and what a wonderful title, right? Because
we'll see. Yeah. My editor likes it, but I think it's a little big.
A little long.
See. But I did hold on to my spirituality, and then that fundamentalist, Bible-based, very judgmental, but there were a lot of good things I got from that too. And I was very steeped in that as a kid. And then I had a few years of wandering in the desert and wandering down the path of alcohol addiction, and then got into recovery, which is another really big thread of my spirituality, the things I learned in the recovery world. And at that same time, as a matter of fact, the same year that I started recovery, I got discovered. I was singing at Michael's Piano Bar on Cedar Springs Road in
Oh,
Dallas. And the minister at CSL Dallas, at that time it was still First Church of Religious Science, came in looking for someone to sing, Mervyn Marty Brocker. And I thought, he was listening to me on my break. I thought he was going to ask me out, and he asked me to sing at his church.
oh well,
And
right.
I thought, what kind of a church has a minister go to a gay piano bar to try and find singers? But that I've been in that tradition now for 30 years, and unity is a part of the New Thought tradition. So it's New Thought, recovery, and then this sort of almost pre-verbal childhood foundational relationship with the divine. Now, of course, a lot of that had to be rewritten. That I don't, it's the God that I misunderstand now is much different than what I thought the divine was when I was a kid. But I do have a relationship with the God of my own understanding. And it's really probably more from my recovery background that without having a higher power, without surrendering my egoic will to something larger and just larger than me, then I'm screwed. And my life doesn't work without that. So this is kind of survival spirituality for me, but it's, I've been sober a long time, and I've been on this path a long time. But that still is the center of my art as well, is this deep connection to the higher, the all that is, in a way that it's very relational for me. So that's how I do that.
Okay, so you got a lot. You said a lot there that I want to
I
talk
did.
about.
I'm a
Yeah.
minister now, so I talk a lot. You just have to tell me to shut up and ask me questions.
No, this is great. This is great. So I want to share this with the listeners, and then let's talk about, because you just said that. I think you said surrender your ego.
Yeah,
Okay. So there's a song on there called Use All of Me.
yeah,
Use All of Me. And I really resonated with this because what I try to teach artists is to connect with God through themselves, God within, and express creatively.
right.
And so I love this. There is a surrendering to it, and we're going to unpack that in a minute. But I'm just going to read some of these lyrics to the listeners, because by the way, they don't show up on Spotify. I had to
Okay.
listen and type, so hopefully I have this correct. You
Okay.
know, and it starts out. It says, "I turn it over. I surrender. I let go of my fear. I release, and I remember your love is always here." Use all of me. Use all of me. All of me. God, use all of me. All my gifts, all my wounds. God, I give it all to you. Use all of me, all of me. I turn it over. I surrender. I let go of my fear. I'm going to skip a little bit down. Take my life, take my dreams, take my lives, take everything for good, for good. I love that.
Yeah, it's take my lies, take
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know I had to hear that twice, by the way, that take my lives, because I was like,
No, it's lie. It's lies. Lies.
oh, take my lies. Oh,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Oh,
My lies.
wow.
Yeah.
Very, very different. Yeah. So what is that? And how do you explain that to people? Because I'll be honest with you, I was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
Not so very serious Catholic. And we participated in the church. And when I was a kid, we'd go in and I volunteered hours doing volunteer work. I taught CCD when I was in high school, and I did the whole thing. And when I started realizing that I was gay, um, that's when I turned away from God. And I had a period, Michael, where I just totally turned. For 20 years, I just didn't even use the word God. When people said the God word, I'd go like this. And
Yeah.
so it's funny because you use God a lot.
I
You use
do, and I have to explain it a lot. And the truth is, and I lead a spiritual community, and we are very diverse from in any way you can measure. And we have a lot of people who have a lot of comfort with the religion of their childhood, and they've evolved into something that still integrates that. And so for them, using the word God feels very normal, even though, like me, it's a larger concept. And then we have people who are really allergic to that word. And so I use a lot of different words, but I use that one too. And as often as I can think of it, I try to contextualize it and just say that there is no word that is going to capture it. I don't know if you know, oh, God, I'm not even remember his name. He's a stand-up comedian, does a lot of spiritual stuff. But anyway, he was being interviewed by a friend of mine recently on his podcast, and he mentions that the road manager for AC/DC has this quote that says, "God is a blanket. The word God is a blanket we throw over the mystery so we have something to point to." And that's really the way I use it. It's not trying to be completely descriptive or capturing, but it's just, I'm talking about that thing, a thing that none of us understand. Yeah.
Which is really interesting. I did some research on that word God, and it was actually only formulated when this is what it says, when the printing press was developed, and it's from the German word Gott.
My last name.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And so, but before that, there were also Elohim and all sorts of other names for God.
Well, and yeah, from the Jewish tradition, and the Jewish people do not say the name of God, because they understand that a name is a box, and the divine is bigger than any name. So it's actually taboo to speak one of the names of Christians. Say it all the time, Elohim and Yahweh, but it's to a Jewish person that's like, no, don't say that.
Oh, and I can understand that, because I think we're limiting the power of spirit, of this great power, by putting it into a name, and then we all fight over the name. There's people fighting.
Get offended by somebody else's name, because that's not right.
Exactly. I mean, if we could just get to a place where we just let people have their own names and understand this. So what I say is understand the spiritual truth behind it. Look at the spiritual truth. I talk about that in my book. There was a period in my life, I kid you not, where someone said, "Bless you." And I get mad. Oh, how dare you bless me?
Well, I like what you do in your book when you ask people to create their own name, and then throughout the book you just have the blank where they can just write in their own name for it. I think that's great.
Right, because I think that I wanted to keep that open open for them. What's interesting though, Michael? I actually had a woman write me and say how offended she was that she had to fill in the name, and I thought, And when someone is offended, I think they should step back and ask themselves.
They should.
Why? Do they? I know.
So it's all projection.
It's all projection.
The ministry, the chief occupational hazard for ministry, but really any sort of public role, is projection. That people project their inner conflict outward onto someone, and so I get it all the time. And I'm a people pleaser who is very sensitive to criticism, so I chose a really funny career to go into. But it's been really healing for me to just not take it personally, or do my best to not take it personally. Yeah.
I love what you just said. It's healing for me too. And I have learned to let people use their names and see the love behind it. See the love behind it. So I have people say stuff, all sorts of stuff, "Bless you" now. And I'm like, well, bless you back. I'm like, well, bless you.
You're in the South. You got to say bless you.
Yeah.
The poet Uriah Mountain Dreamer, I think she's a painter too.
Oh, really?
But she's mostly a poet, but she has this really cool thing. It was in the Science Mind magazine when she was interviewed, and she said that to her, creativity, spirituality, and sexuality are three sides of the same thing within us. And I think that's really true. It's that creative energy that is God. And that is our connection to God. And it's also the source of our creative energy. And I believe, sexual energy too, which is very taboo to talk about in many spiritual circles. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I love what you just said. And then you talk about this. This is a big word for a lot of people. And it's something that I've just gotten to use. You say surrender. I turn it over, I surrender. And immediately a lot of people go, I'm not surrendering anything, right?
Never give up. Yeah.
Right. So how do you view surrender in this sense? What are you wanting people to do?
Well, it's, and this is, again, probably more from my recovery background, and there's a thing that we say in the rooms is that I had to lose to win. And it's really ego. It's the ego that has to give up and to let go completely. But it's not, I don't think of it as giving up, being defeated. I think of it as giving over, that recognizing that my limited human will and perspective is not enough to get me through this life. I need to be tapped into something bigger. And it's okay to think that that's the higher self, but the ego doesn't have access to all of that the higher self does. There's just, again, they're just different way languages and frames you can look at this thing through, but it's not abdicating agency. It's not abdicating desire. It's just that I don't have enough information to be successful at living a life of fulfillment and freedom. I need more than I currently have access to. And there's a lot of arrogance, I think, in some spirituality teachings. And I'm going to say this about my own new thought, because we teach there's no separation, that is the divine creative power that is also what I am. And that's true, but it's not what the ego is. The ego is the separating part of our mind. And it is that part of ourselves that is limited in its perspective and its resources. And so that's the part that needs to surrender so that I can access the limitless creativity, the limitless love and energy that is already within me. I'm not, and the thing about, I always like to say, tell me about this God that you don't believe in, because I don't believe in him either. What's the God that you're mad at?
Exactly. Describe it.
You? That's not what I'm talking about. You don't surrender to that God, but to this infinite, loving, and powerful presence.
So what I hear you saying is, it's not, we think of, I was raised with God was this man in a big chair, and when you die, you sit, at the right hand.
A lot like Zeus.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A lot like Zeus. And you're right. So let's flesh that out, because you are a creative person, obviously, and you're a musician. How this aligns with you as an artist too, right? Surrendering to
a process that is using me sometimes. Do you know the poet Mary Oliver?
Mm-hmm.
Really love her work, and I know she died in 2017, I think. But if you don't know Krista Tippett's podcast on Being, give it a listen. She's NPR person. She explores all these different spiritual places. But she re-aired the 2015 interview with Mary Oliver, and I love Mary Oliver. A lot of spirituality in her poetry and a lot of nature images, and she communed very closely with nature. And she was talking about of all of the thousands of poems that she wrote, there were maybe 4 that just came fully formed. They just, like, somebody else wrote them through her, is what she said. But that does happen. Then she does, what she says is the spark always is this thing that is using me. It's like divine creativity. It's not the ego. And of course, we then, work and edit and we can alter. But I love the idea that even in the creative process, I just have to start and then let something happen. I just, like with painters, I know you just have to start putting color on the canvas and move it around and see what happens. I think there are some artists who are very regulated, planned, execute the plan. But the artists that really move me are the ones that trust the process.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. There are times, the other day, I came into my studio, it was late at night, and I had that download that it was just smooth and fast and magical, but it's not always like that. Sometimes you're having a battle almost with your own ego, like, shut up, shut up,
Well, the critic, yeah. You gotta be, and it's just tough. There are a lot of paradoxes in trying to make art. That we have to surrender to the creative impulse, but then we have to edit. I mean, everybody needs an editor. We probably need other eyes on our work other than our own as well. I mean, that's why the artist and the critic are bound. And you have to have it to make good art, because sometimes the artist, we're so close to what we're seeing, we can't tell if it's good or not. And so, yeah, but the paradox of the human self, even the egoic self, has ideas and needs, and those two, that's why in the song I said, use all of me. use even the parts of me that I would say are inadequate or insufficient, use that too. Whatever this creative thing is that is happening that I'm calling God, use all of it. And there's a thing we say in recovery. It's not actually, I'm going to say it's in some of the literature, is that we ask higher power to remove our defects of character, except when they're useful to others. And that's what I believe, that the divine is so creative. It even uses our character faults and our flaws for good. So, yeah,
Oh,
I don't know. I feel like I missed the thread of your question, but
no. Actually, you didn't. I love that. I love that. It's an aspect that I have. And it's a different way of saying it. So, one of the things I've shared with my listeners that follow me is that I have a tremor, and it has affected my art. I have to paint a different way, and so what you're saying though is another way of looking at that is we're still creative beings. Whether we have a tremor or we're losing some of our eyesight or we can't stand as long, whatever, whatever limitations our body has, and some of them are belief limitations, or like you said, you say take my lies, the way we think. But I think that's really kind of a neat phrase, is to just take it all and
take it
for
all.
good, though.
For good. That's the point. It's not using it all for holiness or, so I can be righteous or go to heaven. It's not that. It's use all that I am for the good for myself, good for other people, good for the good. Just that's what I want it to. I want my life to be for good. I want my art to be for the good.
I really love that. So it's so funny. I'm working on a book right now, my next book, and I'm trying to. And I don't know if you've been using Chat GPT or something, but it's an amazing tool, and I do recommend it. But I have
I
these.
don't know if it works for memoir.
Oh, it's
So.
interesting. It does. You can ask it.
Really?
Yes, it's amazing. But I'll ask it questions that I get into. I actually get into these philosophical debates. But I'm trying to figure out, when you talk about good, because that is a common theme. It goes all the way back, I believe, to Emerson. But
It goes all the way back to Plato.
does it? Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the good,
Well,
the true, and the beautiful.
but how do we measure? Okay, so how do we measure good? Um,
Yeah.
I'm trying to, like, if you have two people doing something that is opposing, both of them think it's for good. How do we measure good?
Well, and this is where you get into the absolute and the relative. And I'm not an absolutist at all, but I do believe in an absolute good, which is never fully revealed on earth. It's just in time and space and form, everything is relative. So everything is relative good. But I do think there is the ideal, that's going back to Plato too, the ideal forms then have lesser expressions here in this 3D reality. I mean, and those, I'm not saying that Plato got it right, but I think he's pointing to something which feels right to me, that there is a good that is beyond, there is no evil that opposes it. There is no bad it's just reality. It's just the essence of creation that is good. And we're trying to capture that, recreate that, make a space for that in our lives, in our relationships, in our spiritual communities. And it's always going to be flawed. It's always going to be imperfect. And there are times, like we're seeing, in a big election cycle here, where we have basically half the country thinks this is what we should be doing for good, and the other side is doing it wrong, and the vice versa. It's complex. Everything human is complex, just is.
It is complex, because you sit there and go, well, which is good? I mean, you're right. Both sides think that they're doing their ultimate goal is good. And I started thinking, well, what if good is in relation to the most effect, like the most people, the most animals, the most things?
That's one way to measure it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what your intention is. And and for me, having this job I currently have, it's pretty clear that I want to keep this 105-year-old progressive church around, even beyond me. That's my legacy. Hopefully I can do things now that will allow it to be the space where people can come and heal their lives so that they can serve the good, they can serve the world. And so that's really the focus of my work right now, is the good I want to do is to sustain Unity of Houston and to do good work while I'm here, work that actually our purpose is in community. We nurture and empower each other that we may transform our lives and serve the world. And that's the good that I am currently mostly working on. And so I think we have to kind of limit, this is the good that I'm talking about right now. And if you're wanting to write a good second book, and then you can have what are the intentions I have for it? What's my audience? And I'm working with a development editor. This is my first book. I've written some articles and been published in some small magazines, but this is my first book. And I've got a really great editor that I'm working with. And she asked me just really, who is this book going to help? That was one of the first questions that she asked was, who is this going to help? And how is it going to help them? And so I had this whole worksheet that I did with her before I ever wrote a chapter. And so that's a different good that I'm working towards than the work I'm doing in my day job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but they overlap. They will overlap because the book will affect the people that come to the.
Yeah, I think I'll sell a few at my church.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I've had like most artists, I've had a lot of dreams of grandiosity. And I'm now, 58, and I'm kind of looking towards retirement from this particular work I'm doing now in the next few years. And I just I don't have much of that kind of ambition left. I heard Michelle Obama recently talk about what a pain in the ass being famous is. It's like, yeah, I don't think I want that. And, and I've worked on my prosperity, and I've got enough money. I'm good. So I'm just like, and I'm not trying to create a religion or change the world in a big way I don't want that. But what can I do that is, so really it's like an inner outer thing. The two words I work with most of the time within the individual are freedom and fulfillment. That I want to be free to be myself and free to live the life that feels right to me. And I want to have a sense of fulfillment. Like I've done what I need to do. The work I've done has had a good effect. And I'm really focused more on that and less about making a big splash these days,
Surely. I mean, you look at all the music you've written and all the works you've done, you have the fulfillment already. It's here right now. You have it.
Yeah, I feel like that. And, I've always been self-produced. I've never had a record contract. I've always I'm a self-sustaining artist. That's what I've always been. And now this is the first time in my life that I've ever had a job with insurance, so I've always been a self-supporting musician. And yeah, and I do have a body of work. What I've noticed lately, I've been kind of looking at some of my older stuff. And I don't know, just feeling like, oh, that kid didn't really know much. And then that's the way I've mostly looked at it. It's like, oh, listen to the way he sang that. Particularly my very first album, I was trying so hard. I was just trying so hard. But now I can even find the beauty in that, I think I was 20, 25, 26, listening to that kid, and there's good in it. There are things in it that are just like, oh, if he had relaxed a bit more, it would have been better. But the earnestness is beautiful too. So I'm trying to integrate it all,
Oh, I love it. I think that's something that as we get to this age, I'm 60. I closed down. I had an ad agency for 25 years, and I did that. I went through everything, and I had a shredder. I had to shred all these old files and stuff. And I started remembering all the people that I employed and all the different personalities and all the drama that I walked through. And it's interesting though, because you also sit there and go, what did that mean? Right? Like, what did that mean? I mean, I spent so much time on it. And I think that's something when people get to what we call the second career, your second stage of your life, that's what we're talking about, you kind of go back and say, right? And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. I still meet a lot of artists that are like, I want to be famous, and I want to have everybody know my name, and I want to be in, all the museums. And of course, sure. I've long ago given that up. Yeah. And what I focus on is for me, what I want to be able to do is what I did the other night, to walk into my studio and for 2 hours feel that what I call the connection to spirit, to God, and just free flow paint. And
Yeah.
even if I donate the painting to a fundraiser in Dallas, that it's the feeling I'm looking for, right?
Yeah. And I would, that fulfillment, you have a gift, you have a desire to express that gift. And so you're going to create something. And when you've completed a painting, you have fulfilled that creative urge within you. That's that word fulfillment that I'm talking about. It's like, that's enough. And then you're willing to, sell it and make, because we all need money to live
Right. If
here.
someone wants to buy it, sure. Yeah.
Sure. Or find another place where it can do some more good. But I think the primary good that you're describing, Chris, is that this thing that is in you that needs expression, you have done that. And you want it, and you're growing and learning as an artist, and you're evolving, and that's the point of it. It really is. It's that, and it's not. When I was leaving CSL Dallas, and nobody there wanted me to go, but I knew that for my growth, I needed to go. And I was given an opportunity to move to Reno for a couple of years, in the Reno Tahoe area, and beautiful community there that I worked with. And a friend of mine, and I was really struggling. It's like, I think this is good for me, but I don't know that it's going to be good for the people in Dallas that really want me to stay there. And a friend of mine there in Reno reminded me of something. Didn't remind me, I didn't know this quote from Alan Cohen, great writer. He says, "There is no private good." And that's a big claim. There is no private good. And I think about that, like even with family systems, particularly around addiction, that if one person gets better, whether it's the what do you call it? See, I'm the addict. I'm not the enabler.
It's all about the addict, right? No,
Yeah, but whether it's the enabler or the addict, if one person gets better, it actually helps the other person get better too. And the same thing, that if you're going to do this thing for you at your painting, this is a good thing for you to do for your soul, for your heart. It's going to bless other people too. It will, because there is no private good.
I love that. It's so funny. I learned sort of that lesson. I'm in a relationship. We've been together for 33 years. And but it's not always, relationships are not always easy. And we always say you go in and out, right? There's moments where you feel, oh, madly in love. And there's moments you're like, what, who is this?
What am I doing here?
Exactly. What am I doing with this person? But I went to a counselor many years ago, early on in our relationship. And I think our tendency is always to try to fix the other, right? I'm going to change you. I'll change the situation. But she said, Chris, if you work on yourself, like I wanted to get him to start emptying the dishwasher and doing laundry and helping around the house. But if you turn it inward and work on yourself, it does change them.
It does, because you're different. You're not nagging him to do the dishwasher anymore. It makes people more likely to want to work with you when you're not needing them to be different, because they feel that you're seeing them and respecting them differently. Yeah.
Right. It's a shift.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it might even be beyond that in the sense that sometimes I don't even know how it does. It's an energy shift. It's like on a cellular level where there's a shift in the relationship. And I did look for stuff like that, obviously, like talking, but sometimes it's just an energy level. And so you're going to Utah, I think we can only take care of this, right?
Yeah. We're only responsible for this. I mean, that's, if you're a parent, obviously, and I know you are, that you're taking on a big responsibility there too. But ultimately, I learned this actually in Al-Anon, is that God doesn't have grandkids. Your son is on his own spiritual journey, and you are responsible to feed, clothe, educate, those kind of things. But really, he's going to find his own way in this life, and then he's responsible for his experience.
Right. It's like what I read somewhere that we think we have children, but really everybody's God's child. And
that's it.
This is an interesting. This is interesting. I spent the day with my mother yesterday. She's in her 80s, but at some point in our lives, and I don't know if you had this feeling, I shifted from looking toward my parents as my guide to looking towards, I'll use your G word,
Mhm.
to looking towards God as your father. You know, you shift that energy. Some people never do. Some people
Yeah.
spend their lives trying to please their parents. But ideally you want to shift to your relationship with what this creative, and I call it a creative intelligence.
Yeah. It's beautiful. You're not the first to call it that, but that's a great term. There's a yeah. There are a lot of New Thought writers that use that exact phrase. I love it. It's great. And sometimes divine creative intelligence is the phrase that I like. Yeah, and I think that's true. And for me, with my therapeutic journey, which is another part of my maybe not spirituality, but my wholeness journey, was I would joke that like for a decade in therapy, it would be my dad had done this to me, and then the next decade, my mom had done this to me. And I did. I spent a lot of years trying kind of unwinding my childhood, and and in this book I'm writing, it's really about my spiritual journey, but it's very I'm talking about my family and the things I experienced as a child, and now that I'm almost 60, I recognize, of course, they were only human. There's a memory that I had a huge thing a thread that had been coming up in romantic relationships, work relationships, friends relationships recently, and there was a common thread that I wasn't aware of. So there's a process called fear to faith. I don't know if you've ever done it, but
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. So a friend of mine in California is an amazing teacher and minister, Dr. Kathy Hearn, and I asked her to facilitate it for me, and it took me back to a moment when I was 3 years old and my mother was raging, and it just shaped so much of the way I am in relationships that I've got to keep people from being that angry at me. Anything I can do to keep people, because I was a terrified toddler, and I can see all of that. But then the first time, and I do have compassion for my parents. I've known that they've been human for all. I lost my dad 8 years ago next month, and um, love my dad. My mom is still with us, but she's having a lot of challenges, and they're human, really get it. But in that moment, after I did that work, I realized that my mother was 29 years old, that her mother had just died after a long cancer battle. She had two kids at home. She was grieving. She was young, and she had just had it. She did the best that she could, and then up until that moment, she lost it. And of course, if anyone I know has that experience, I understand, and I will give a lot of forgiveness there. And I was able to do that. It's just I get that was the best she could do at the moment. And the truth is, there's I can never remember his name. It's an English psychologist in the 50s came up with the term the good enough mother.
Yeah.
And I always knew I was loved. I always knew I was safe. So my parents were good enough. They really did a great job. And I love that idea too. There's also a school of thought called the good enough minister.
Yeah.
Because I definitely make mistakes that impact people in a negative way, and I hate that I'm trying to at least create a space of safety and love.
So you were able to get past that limiting belief, that string that kept coming through.
Yeah, for sure. It was a belief in rejection, that people reject me because I'm flawed. That yeah, I think the word was damage that came through in that process, in that exercise. That at the end of that exercise, you'll notice there's a releasing prayer. It's the 3 lines.
I do. I
And
actually have one taped up here. I did.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're great. Mine is I release my belief in rejection. I release my need to feel damaged. I'm grateful. God is the joy I am. And yeah, it's healing. And it's rewriting the neural pathways, and it's more than just brain tissue. It is a spiritual thing, that some energetic shift is occurring in me around this thing that I've been carrying my whole life, which definitely showed up in my romantic relationships and my friendships. And I'm allowing something different to move in me now.
Yeah, I have mine. Let me see. Mine was similar to yours. Oh, see. Yeah, mine is I release my belief in disease and death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty heavy. And I release my need to be angry, because I tend to get angry. And then I am grateful God is the freedom I am.
Ooh,
the freedom.
Yeah. And, other people who don't know that process, they're like, those are weird words. But when you go through, there are like 12 steps of this process, and you get to this where you're associating those words with particular sets of feelings and experiences. And so it's like a code for you. Death and disease means something really personal and
Right.
really integral to your journey. And the same thing for me, the idea of rejection. Yeah, it's deep.
Well, and
We
see,
are
like
deep
it's
beings.
a great. I did that process with Dr. Petra a couple times, and then and recently I took a class. But when for me the death and disease is that deeper level of fear of an end.
Yeah.
Like if you're operating everything out of fear that there's an end, a limit. So it is a great process. It
It is a
is.
great process.
So
And,
I want to.
I've been obsessed with death lately in a really positive way.
Comes
Just
at
like
60, my friend.
everything dies. I'm actually speaking on it this Sunday at Unity. It's called the impermanence of form, which is a Buddhist phrase, and it comes from Buddhism. But that's everything you can point to or name, including our bodies, including our philosophies, our art, our systems of government. It's all temporary. Everything is terminal. And for me, I'm just like, I'm gonna die.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm around death a lot. I'm a spiritual leader in a community, and people are always dying, or their parents are dying, or their children are dying. And some of them are difficult deaths. We've had quite a few suicides in the community since COVID, and quite a few folks who have lost young children, not young children, but young adult children. And I'm not trying to minimize the pain around death, but I am really integrating the reality of it
Mm.
for all of us. And I'm going to die. And what I always say at the end of a memorial service, I did one yesterday. And this woman, I didn't know her. She had not been around our community since I've been there, but she was 96 and almost never went to doctors, was homeopathic and nutrition and health, and really just a firecracker from everything I understand. She, anyway, at the end of all my memorial services, the last thing I do is I just say, this day is coming for all of us. It doesn't matter that you're going to die. Are you living? Are you living your life? Are you saying what you need to say to the people you need to say it to? Are you spending your days in a way that is what your soul is asking for? That's the important thing about it being temporary, about it being terminal, so that we can bring meaning. I love you used that word earlier, so that we can make it mean something. Every breath, every day is a gift. And I
It
want to
is.
get really old. I want to get really old. I do.
But
I've been saying, Chris, I think I was horrible at being young. I think I've been kind of okay at middle age, but I think I'm going to be a kick-ass old man.
I think that too. I thought that myself. But let's go back to what you said. It's true. When you see it around you, though, there's always a part of you, or let me personalize. There's always a part of me that was like, "Oh, that's going to happen to them." But
Oh
I
yeah,
think as you get older and you deal with health, there's a certain age and health issues of yourself, you go, wait a minute.
yeah,
And that word integrate, you start realizing, oh, yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
only have so many years left, and I only
That's
have
right.
so much, and I need to make it matter.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Mean it. Make it mean something.
yeah.
And really, like we were talking about earlier, the ambitious ego would be, well, that means you have to sell, 1 million books. That means you have to make so much money. It's not about those things.
I
But
was gonna.
you have to fulfill your creative mission.
Yeah, I like it because it's kind of Buddhist, but yes, you have to be it. It's when
Yeah.
you say meaning, it means being all that you can be in every moment. And so when I create art and I'm being totally present and I'm feeling the color, when I'm coaching someone or counseling someone who has a loss in their lives, and I am letting spirit flow through me to help them, I am being is the highest for me. That's the highest I can be
Yeah,
you know
that's it.
that wonderful. So there's something I want to question you on in your lyrics. Back to your lyrics.
Okay.
So I want to know, how much have you integrated that God is in you?
Yeah, pretty fully. I've been in this teaching for 30 years. It was a very new concept when that minister hired me from the bar. That was in 1993. So it's been 31 years that I've been in this teaching. I didn't believe it. I didn't understand it, but I stuck around, because they were paying me $75 a week to play piano and sing at their church, at their weird church. But what I did notice from the very first service is that nobody was yelling at me and telling me that I was wrong for being gay, that I was none of that. It was just that I was wrong for drinking, none of that. There was none of that. So it has been a slow integration. I joke sometimes with my community. I say I'm a really quick study, except about anything that matters. And those things take me a long time to learn. And I would say knowing that God is the indwelling presence of the divine, not only is in me, like that. I love, who was it? Well, my minister, executive minister is like my number 2 at our church. She spoke a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember who it was that she said, it's like we think of it like the raisin in the bun. God is in me like a raisin. Yeah. Where is it? It's not that. It's like it is what we are. We are of its essence, and it is our source of all life. And yet we have the experience here in the relative reality of humanity of it sure doesn't look like God. It sure doesn't feel like God. So we want to find what are the God parts, what are the not God parts. And my growth edge, I love Hildegard of Bingen, German mystic in 14th to 15th century, I think. She has this beautiful phrase that she said, I want to remain on the green and growing edge of my becoming. Isn't that beautiful?
That's poetic, yes.
It is. And she said it in German, of course, probably didn't sound like that. But the green and growing edge of my becoming is not so much of my life. It was like getting over my character defects and my bad habits, and getting better at skills I needed in the world. I mean, it's all of that stuff, being more successful. That's where most of my green and growing edge has been in the first half of life. But now it's integrating my humanity, integrating my faults, my frailties, my limitations, the fact that I am human and will die, I will become ill, those things, to make that all part of the divine. Because I would want to separate, those parts are human, God's not in that. No, God is in that God is revealed in our living and in our dying. God is revealed in all of it. And man, this is like some of the most intense and difficult integration work I've done in my spiritual path. But sometimes I just sit around and cry at how beautiful it all is. And it's making me a much more compassionate minister, for sure. That I have people come in to see me with so much self-criticism and judgment. And I'm just like, it's okay. You're human. You're divine in all of it, So I feel like I have really integrated that God is, well, I'm going to say a little contradictory thing. A lot of paradoxes here. Ernest Holmes said that the innermost God and the highest most God is one God. But there is a highest most. There is the cosmos, and there is a creator, creation, and creative process. I am not all that. All that is what I am, but I am not all that is. Do you get the distinction?
Yeah. I like to use the word the broader, because the highest is puts one above the other. I like to say the broader spirit.
Well, we have to use spatial metaphors, and they're all wrong. They're all wrong. I mean, I could find a criticism abroad too, but if that's working for you, go with it. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, language is limited, and we're trying to describe something that is beyond description. So we use metaphor of higher or broader or deeper or stronger or brighter, a little more light. It's all, but those are just metaphors. And there's how are we doing on time?
You're good.
There's a Bible story
okay,
that I love.
Okay.
And it's from the Hebrew scriptures when Moses is talking to God, to Yahweh, Elohim, and says, show me your face. God says, you can't handle looking at my face. You can't you won't understand. It will blow your mind. It will kill you. He said, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide you in this cleft of this rock, and then I'm going to pass by. And after I pass by, you will be able to look upon my hind parts. That's what it says.
Get out.
Yeah,
that's real.
Yeah, this is it. This is in the Bible. Oh, you are Catholic. You don't know Bible stories.
No, we don't. We don't go into that.
It's a beautiful story, and anyway, and so what happened was that Moses was able to look upon the backside of God's butt, and was transformed. And when he came back down from Mount Sinai, his face glowed. There were beams of light shining from, which is interesting because in one of the translations in the Renaissance, it was horns instead of beams. And so if you look at Michelangelo's sculpture of Moses, he has horns.
Oh,
but it's talking about this, he was transformed by this experience. So the metaphysics and the metaphor of that story is that we'll never know God. We'll never understand the infinite. But if we pay attention, we can see where it's been. We can see the transformation. I am this year, by the grace of God, if I don't drink one day at a time till November 18th, I will be sober 25 years.
Wow.
That is miraculous for someone who drank like I did. I can see where God has been in my life. I didn't know I still don't know what it is. I can't put it in a box. The infinite has no edges. You can't put it in a box. But I can sure see that it's real because I have the experience of it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Very beautiful.
Sermon for no extra charge there.
Yeah. There's some lines in there that read great in songs, Michael.
Well, I will tell you, I'm writing this book. I'm running this church. I'm busy. I'm still doing I was just with Lainey at Unity of Austin 2 weeks ago and did a concert up there. I'm still doing some traveling stuff too. And I'm going to be in the studio on Monday. I am working on a new album. And yeah, I thought I was telling you that I don't have any more ambition. It sounds like I'm very ambitious.
Well, it's different. It's being creative. It's something you have to do.
Yeah,
it's not.
It is.
Ambition is like you're looking to get noticed or achieve something. It's who you are.
Yeah, and music is my first love, and it is the center of my life, the center of my heart, the center of my artistic expression. I think I do love writing, but when I started speaking, it was like I got to a point where I couldn't say everything I needed to say by singing a song. I needed more space and language around that. So I started speaking. It turns out I'm good at that too. I've gotten to do that for a living for a few years now. And I think the writing is a similar thing. There's something in that process that is allowing me to express a way that music doesn't give me access to. But music is the heart. I didn't do an album from 2011 until 2022, and my joke was, and I've been a pretty successful minister. I've been a minister now for 15 years, and I said this whole ministry career is really, this ministry thing has really gotten in the way of my career, because my music has really taken a back seat, and it grieves me. And so, doing the album that you've been referencing that you listened to, it was very personal. It was a very personal project. Years ago, Ricky Byers, who's one of our other singer-songwriters in our movement, who is very well known and very respected, and again, a friend. And she had asked me if I've ever done a project like that, where it's just me at the piano, no production, no band, none of that, no background singers. And I hadn't. And she said, you need to do that because people will get a different relationship with your music that way. And she was right. And that's what that album is. It was very personal. But it was also just great to be back in the studio and great writing music again. And yeah, so I am looking forward to retirement. And if you're listening, I just did air quotes around that word. I'm looking forward to the next chapter of my work. I'm enjoying this one, and I've got a few more years in it. But I am looking forward to having more space to make music. It feels really important.
Yeah, I love it. And your music is beautiful, and it's just about telling stories. And I think the difference between a good artist and a fantastic artist is when you feel that emotion,
I agree. I think that And I think the same is true for, church is also, you think God's a bad word, church is really a bad word, especially for the millennials and Gen Z. They just want nothing to do with it on the whole. Um, and and yet for me, it's like I love I love people who are kind of on a similar spiritual path coming together and celebrating and singing and learning and growing together, making friends. I just think the concept is so great. Just the trappings of it are so off-putting for a lot of people. But what I say is, if people are going to give up part of their weekend and get dressed and get out of their house on a Sunday morning, they sure as hell better feel something when they get there. So I want the music to have emotion. I want my message to have emotion. And for art, for sure, those are that. Well, for me anyway, the artists that move me, whether it be music, painting, literature, poetry, there has to be a depth of feeling in it.
Oh man, we could talk for so long. Anyway, we are running out of time, but I love that too. And I have a show right now called Love Roller Coaster, and it's paintings painted to songs. And it's open till October 27th, listeners. It's at the Eisman Center in Richardson, but it's open to the public. It's free. You come in, you put your headphones on, you listen to the song I listened to when I painted it.
So, I love that.
Yeah. So what I did is I just listened to the song over and over and over again while I felt that flow. Yeah. I stepped into spirit. I call it like stepping into spirit and doing that flow. And
was Love Roller Coaster one of the songs?
Yeah. There's one. Oh, Roller Coaster's mentioned in like 3 or 4 songs in there.
Yeah, that was like from '77, something like that.
Yes, but
the Ohio Players.
Do you know what's funny, Michael? It's not all happy though, because it's all of these spectrums. It's love lost. It's love separated. It's the loss of love. So their songs take you up and down a roller coaster. It's all of me, so it's all of emotion of love. And so I love that. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
Well, if I had one piece of advice for artists or for anyone, it's just don't let the critic win. Don't let the critic stop you from expressing. That's really it. I'm a big student of the Enneagram personality typing.
Oh yeah.
And there are certain types that have a much stronger inner critic, and a lot of artists tend to have a very strong inner critic. And I think that you're good enough. That's the message. Just you do what you're here to do, and don't worry about let other people judge it or not. But just don't stop yourself from living your best life and creating your best art because you think it's not good enough.
I love it. True. It's true. Thank you for being on the show, Michael.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, I'll tell my listeners that you are the Reverend in Houston, Unity in Houston, so they can come and see you speak. And I think it sounds like you're gonna have a good service this Sunday.
I think so. Yeah, we have a new choir director, and we're really excited about that. Some gospel music. It's unityhouston.org. You can find it all there.
All right, thanks. So listeners, follow me on YouTube. Go up there and choose the follow button so you hear more interviews like this. Remember, I have a book, The Spatial Artist, on Amazon.com. And try to come to the Love Roller Coaster. It's a free, incredible experience. It'll make you feel. And that's what we all should do, is feel with the time we have on this planet. Talk to you soon. And thank you for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.